recording. Wonderful. All right, so welcome everybody to the State Standards Update. First of all, I'd like to thank all of you for taking time out of your busy day to join us. I know especially with back to school time happening right now, it's definitely a very busy time of year, and so we appreciate you taking the time out of your day to listen to this webinar. Secondly, as I just mentioned, we are recording this and it will be put up on the NRC at the end of the recording. How are we going to lay things out today? So we're going to do a brief overview of the standards, but really the meat of the standards, or the meat of the webinar, I should say, is in this timeline and requirements, and so that's where we'll be spending most of the time. So very quickly, for those who remember from our March webinars, which are also on the NRC, we have now these three different and distinct areas for the state standards, and these are state standards that were released in March of 2017. So we have our business standards, which are basically best practices. Those should and do mirror a lot of the independent affiliate standards with some tweaks, of course, for states. We then have this network operations piece, and that is really how states interact with the direct services, either through their independent affiliates that they help support or through direct services themselves. And then, of course, that leads nicely into this third piece of there are some states that do direct services and those have specific standards around them. And then, of course, there are some states that do not have any direct services, in which case those standards would not apply for your state office. So those are just a quick overview. And now, since most of, as I mentioned, the bulk of this webinar is in discussing the timeline and the requirements, we're really focusing today on the network operations. So you might remember this slide from March, our March webinar series. So the network operations at 20,000 feet. So really the focus here is on the training and support of independent affiliates, constituent engagement, and how to develop and manage your network. And really, as mentioned in that blue box there, the revised standards set a baseline that aligns with work being done by strong state offices, helps state offices to best support affiliates, and support the expansion of communities and schools. So that's kind of the overall goal. And so how do we get there? Well, we have a bunch of some revised and some relatively new standards. And so I'm going to turn it over to Kelly to kind of discuss what those reports look like, what the requirements look like, and she'll take it from there.
Cool. Thanks, Julie. So we here at the National Office, since releasing the standards in March, have been working on sort of creating this timeline and formalizing some of these reports and seeing what those deliverable outcomes are going to actually look like for you. So you're going to be familiar with some of these already. The State Office Annual Report is one that you're going to be familiar with. It's due every year in November. That's going to stay the same. We're still going to ask you to submit those in November. But two of the newer reports that are going to be just part of this formalizing process around the new standards are going to be the annual TQS monitoring report, which is aligned with Network Operations Standard 2.1, and your annual review of affiliate documentation, which is aligned with Network Operations Standard 3.3. These reports are going to be aligned in terms of due dates around that same time in November. So our idea there is to kind of keep it simple with you, for you all, one standard due date every single year in November. And so these reports, since they're new, they do kind of hold a bit more background work, which Julie will go into later when we talk a little bit about some of the resources that have been created in the last couple of months to help you accomplish these standards and accomplish these reports. We are going to be asking that these TQS monitoring report and the review of affiliate documentation start in 2018. So you won't be turning in any of those reports this year, but that will start in 2018. Of course, the State Office Annual Report will continue as you've normally been kind of operating there. And so once we go into those resources a little bit later, definitely think that the important part here is that you're doing your due diligence throughout the year to help kind of conduct these reports of your affiliates and make sure that you understand kind of the state of your affiliate network prior to these due dates in November, so you're not having to rush in the months leading up to November. So I'm going to go briefly into the timeline, and then we can pop back into this slide to talk a little bit more about the reports if we need. So you will see on this slide all of the due dates kind of on an annual cyclical cycle for your affiliate and your state office reaccreditations. So if you'll remember, in January, we opened up Box.com for your affiliates to drop in their documents if they were undergoing reaccreditation. And of course, that sort of closed around in June. The state office cycle will go along in sort of a mirrored timeline, sort of opposite to that schedule. So when you see in June that the Box.com is closing for affiliates, in July it's going to open up for your state offices. We'll keep that sort of formal box space open until November, when all of this is going to be due. So you're going to have your state office annual report due, your monitoring report, and your annual review of affiliate documentation, as well as all of that documentation that's going to be required for your distance review for your state offices. You're going to see your sort of site visits happening in the early part of the year, January and February, and then the National Network Committee will vote in April. One thing I definitely want to highlight here is that sort of bullet point there in May that we're asking that if you are submitting exemptions of any kind for any standard, whether that's for your state office or for your affiliate offices, that information needs to be done before your office goes in through their accreditation cycle. So we need to know that before you've submitted your documentation for reaccreditation.
And just two really quick things, Kelly, that I think you mentioned on the previous slide, but just to reiterate here, is that in November, regardless of whether you're going through reaccreditation, you must hand in those 3 reports. So that's something that you will be doing every year. It's the SOAR, it's the annual monitoring, and then the review of affiliate documentation. And then secondly is, just in case you're wondering, where did you get these dates? We actually took this from the survey. So this is feedback. Thank you for those of you who filled out the survey that responded to a survey about what dates fit best for you, and we tried to really accommodate as many, we kind of took a tally to see how it would work. And so that comes directly from your kind of request in following up with that survey.
Great. Chris, did you have anything else on this slide you wanted to mention?
I do not.
Okay, great. So we will go into sort of the specific timeline, including some of those dates for those of you who are on the call who are going through reaccreditation in 2018. Of course, you'll remember back in March, as we referred to, we released the standards, and we will be opening up Box next July. On July 16th is when we'll commit to having those Box structures available to you. Of course, as you should know, Box is something that is available to you at all times. It's open throughout the year. That's just when we're committing to having that sort of formal report structure, Box structure available to you that you'll need to kind of drop things into for our review. Obviously, we're going to be conducting trainings throughout that time to make sure that you feel well equipped in using this technology. That Box open structure cycle will continue until November 16th, and then we will begin our review period and start our sort of site visits in January, early January, February, March. And then, of course, culminating there with the National Network Committee in April. And so that calendar that you saw on the slide before is going to be something that will happen annually, and then these dates here are going to be specific to 2018 reaccreditation.
Yep, and so just as Kelly mentioned, this is for those of you who should be aware that your state offices are up for reaccreditation in 2018. For those who might be participating here that are not up for reaccreditation and maybe up for accreditation in 2018, I just wanted to emphasize that this timeline does not apply to you, that this is really the process for the virtual review around reaccreditation. Accreditations will involve, more intensive site visits. And then the other piece I did want to mention here, just as a reference for those who have direct services, and particularly those who have direct services that may not have undergone a review for accreditation of what was formerly called the embedded affiliates. We will, in all likelihood, slate state offices for site visits, particularly for those, so that we can visit some of those direct service locations that we have not had a chance to visit either yet or as part of these new direct services standards being built into the state office accreditation and reaccreditation processes. So just as a heads up, particularly for those that are getting ready for 2018 state office reaccreditation, it is likely, and more likely, particularly if you have direct services, that we will conduct a site visit It won't be that sort of same randomization that we do for affiliates.
Perfect, thank you. So lastly, and this is a slide that you will, again, be familiar with, we just wanted to kind of reiterate the sort of extension process for these new standards. So this will kind of mirror the extension process that your affiliates are undergoing, and so we will offer 2-year extensions if you're undergoing reaccreditation in 2018, should any findings require it. And if you're undergoing reaccreditation in 2019, that would be a 1-year extension, and then starting in 2020, we would kind of be reverting back to the standard extension process for reaccreditation. So on that note, we will kind of go through, there are a couple of other requirements that I'll turn over to Chris that will kind of happen throughout the year. These are not formal reports that are processed through to the national office, but are things that we want you to be thinking about throughout the year because they kind of take a little bit of back work.
Right, and so I think one of the things that we wanted to do with this webinar, as both Julie and Kelly mentioned, was to give you as much upfront information now so that you all can incorporate this into your operational planning throughout the year. A lot of the pieces on this slide, as Kelly mentioned, one, they don't necessarily require reporting submitted to us on an annual basis, but they are things we will be checking for either within the last 12 months, or some of these require sort of every 3 years or along with your strategic planning process. And so we will be checking them as part of the reaccreditation virtual review. And so I just wanted to take a quick minute to walk through these just as reminders. Some of these are not necessarily new, but wanted to highlight them since we had you all on the call. So first, starting up there with the Network Operations Standard 1.2. This is your statewide assessment. This is the assessment around expansion opportunities. And so I just wanted to highlight that we will be looking for that assessment. We don't have, we have some tools for you to use around this, but we don't have, a required format for this assessment. You're welcome to leverage our tools, but if you already have a built-in process around assessing growth opportunities within your networks, both regionally and statewide, you can do that. And this is something that we ask to be done at least every 5 years for you to assess that and to provide that assessment. If your reaccreditation is coming up, you did some sort of growth assessment in the past 5 years, there's no need to redo that if it's still relevant. And so we'll just want to make sure that we see the documentation of that. Again, it doesn't have to be formal. I think you all are familiar with that process and our ability to examine the evidence to determine whether you've met the intent of the standard versus checking boxes. So don't feel like it has to be something so strict. The next piece is relatively new. So this is the annual training plan. So in past standards, we have asked that state offices assess the training needs of their network. We are now formalizing that in a bigger way around this standard 2.2, which addresses a training plan, and that is annual. So we are asking that on an annual basis, you're taking a look at your network based on your cycles and your schedules and the learning opportunities that you're currently providing for your network to address the training needs for the affiliates, identify the levels of individuals that need training, and determining how you're going to facilitate those learning opportunities. The next one on this list is 3.2, monitoring affiliate end-of-year reports. This is something you already do. So prior to the end-of-year reports coming to us, we expect state offices to take a look at them, review them for accuracy, and so just wanted to highlight it, but it shouldn't be anything new in terms of your processes currently, though we have built it into the standards now as a formal requirement. Participation in state director meetings and calls, and then participation in national network initiatives. These, again, things that you probably don't have to necessarily do anything in addition to what you're currently doing, but we are monitoring the attendance for those meetings, particularly for the state director meetings and calls, and are monitoring participation in whether it be national committees or national initiatives, engagement in the Virtual Institute, engagement on the TQS Governance Committee, engagement in our TQS implementation committees, some of our communities of practice that we're looking at and working on, We recognize that not everybody is going to participate at the same level. However, just engagement with the national office on those broader network initiatives is now formalized within a standard. Affiliate visits. This is something that, again, is not new, but we are requiring it and are going to be looking for documentation of state office visits to each of their affiliates. And that's at least once per year that we require that currently. And then state network convenings, and this is convening primarily executive directors, and we're asking that those are done face-to-face twice per year. We recognize that particularly for those in places with really wide geographic regions, that may not always be the easiest thing to accomplish. I think most of you are already doing this anyway, but we will look at how you're engaging executive directors and ensuring that you're meeting the intent of that standard about bringing your network together, bringing network leadership together to strategize and prioritize, roll out information, et cetera. One of the things that I know that Julie's probably going to mention this as well as she walks through some of our resources that we have here, but it's important to note that a lot of these items and some of the items that Kelly mentioned are not necessarily new, but were highlighted before, were things that oftentimes were captured in SYSDM, legacy SYSDM, and so particularly engagement with your affiliates, the visits, the convenings, and some of the communications and rollouts. However, SYSDM no longer, the new SYSDM 2.0 will no longer capture those state network operations pieces. And so it's important that this documentation is held somewhere else. And Julie will walk through some of the resources that we're providing for you to be able to do that. But we will no longer be able to look at SYSDM and pull a report and find out and see some of that engagement. So it's important that you're keeping a record of that. And then one last thing on this slide, and that I wanted to highlight, that's not included on this list, but is something sort of outside of some of this list is the state network protocols. So we have national office protocols, which essentially govern the agreement and set out sort of govern the interaction and set out sort of formal processes for the interaction between the national office, state offices, and affiliates. Particularly around advocacy work, communications information, what sort of communications channels we will be using, and the triggers that require communication either to or from the national office. We are now asking that state offices formalize protocols for themselves if you have not done that. I know a lot of you have kind of operational processes that you've built. There's no need to redo those. Those would likely meet the requirements there around protocols, but important that folks take a look at that standard and make sure that they have the documentation in place to demonstrate that they're meeting that. So that's all I have.
We're actually going to pause here for questions since that was kind of a lot of information. So again, you can either raise your hand and we will unmute you, or you can put your question in the chat function, the chat box.
So we're not seeing any questions come up. I do want to emphasize.
Hello, this is Doug Martin in Florida, and I just wanted you all to document that I am participating in this call.
Sounds great.
Thanks, Doug.
So not seeing any questions come up on the content that we just went through. I do want to say that, we want to make sure that some of these requirements are pretty clear, given that we are going to be requiring these, pretty soon, and I know that you all need to do a lot of your annual planning and things like that. So we're obviously always available outside of this, but this is really the opportunity if there's any confusion or concerns that we address that. Judy, just saw your question come up on the chat box, and we will definitely get back to you about your reaccreditation year following the meeting.
All right, we'll have another opportunity for questions at the end. I am going to do a demo, but first I'm going to run through the rest of the slides, and then Kelly is going to let me share my screen, and I'll do a demo for you just to show you where some of these things are. So the resources, so first of all, resource navigation. We have these fabulous people on our staff here at National called Resource Navigators. If you ever have any questions about anything that's on our National Resource Center, as we call it the NRC, you can email them at resourcenavigators@sysnet.org. And of course, the website there for the National Resource Center is up there, as well as the password. That's just a quick thing. Moving on to state standard resources. So this is a little different, and I wanted to make sure that, and I will demo this as well. This is, the state standards are actually in a different place than the independent affiliate business standards. So most of the business standards are under nonprofit operations, but the state standards and the resources are actually under accreditation process and standards. And they get their own little section right under the state standards called resources. And so just be aware that they're not in the same location as some of our other resources. So next slide, please. Two of the things that I'll be showing you today, actually three things, are the two resources that we have for 2.1, the annual monitoring, as well as the resource for 3.3, the verifications piece. So this is a copy of the report that you will fill out, and again, I will go through this in a little bit more detail. But this report, basically, the first page is an overall summary of all of your affiliates that you help support, and then the second page is specific to that certain affiliate, and you'll see when I go into the demo, we require certain questions to be answered, and we also require that you look into SYSDM for the student support aspects. So this is one of those things that we will expect this report every year on that November date. So that might seem overwhelming, so what we have for 2.1 as well is a tracker, and this is basically an Excel tracker that just has your affiliate at the bottom of each tab, all of the standards, and then if that affiliate has met it or not, or is working on it, or needs to work on it, et cetera. And again, I'll actually be filling in some of that when we do the demo. So this tracker will help inform the report for 2.1 that we saw on the previous slide.
And if I could jump in here, the other thing, I know that a lot of state offices have asked for a resource like this, and so we've kind of done that on an ad hoc basis that basically helps track each of the standards and sort of the progress toward it. And so feel free to use this not just as your annual monitoring report, but also as you're working with independent affiliates who are maybe up for accreditation or up for reaccreditation in support of them as well. And so I think, I think it's just a helpful resource. And then the other piece I wanted to point out is that, and I know that this has come up in a couple times when we think about the monitoring around TQS and whether they are currently meeting standards or not, we are not looking at this as a way of being sort of punitive or interjecting midway around whether or not affiliates are meeting certain standards. And we leave it up to you, sort of the process of determining whether or not that they are. And we wouldn't look at this and say, oh, this affiliate has not met 3 standards or is not currently meeting 3 standards according to the state office. We need to send out an email to that affiliate. What it does for us is highlight potential red flags, give us a sense as we head into reaccreditation years and that cycle with independent affiliates, where they were and what progress they had been making, and all of that. So we will continue to monitor these. And then the other piece I wanted to let you know of is that we do this at a national office level for our local network affiliates who do not have state offices. So that's what we'll be doing and producing those reports here at the national office. It just gives us a much cleaner and broader sense of what's going on with our network around TQS and where we can potentially step in to provide additional resources. Did get a notice that the audio is cutting out a little bit, and so hopefully we can sort of solve that. If not, we'll try to make some adjustments to let us know if you're not catching the information from us during the webinar.
And then lastly, again, this 3.3 annual review of affiliate documentation. So this is an Excel report that I will show you how it works, but basically this is what you could hand in on that November date. So yeah, we'll do that demo momentarily. So just a couple of the other things. So for a lot of these resources, there's trackers, as Chris mentioned. Some of this information used to be in SysDem and it is no longer, so we've developed these trackers. If you have your own system of tracking this information, you certainly do not need to use our system. We were just providing a tool and a resource for you to do so. So you may certainly use your own. But just for example, some of the trackers, and once again, you'll see this momentarily, developing new communities. I believe there's even a couple of examples with that, and then supporting new affiliate leadership. So. And here are some additional ones. So participation in national network initiatives, you can jot that down, and then the affiliate visits, so you can record who you're visiting and when, and kind of what you discussed. And then, of course, we also have some additional support. So we have some of these guides. They just offer questions for usually around a lot of the procedures or protocols. So, for example, 5.1, the state network protocol, there's just a list of questions there that you can kind of reflect on. And that's how there are a couple like that are just really a list of questions to help guide you as you create these procedures and protocols. And so now, before we move into questions, which I'm happy to take as well, I was going to do a demo. So Kelly, if you wouldn't mind passing me the ball. Great. Passing the ball. And I'm going to share my screen. All right. Oh, we're jumping ahead here. So this should look familiar to you. This is the Great NRC, National Resource Center. And as I mentioned, instead of things being over in nonprofit operations, they'll actually be right here at the tippy top on the left-hand upper corner, accreditation process and standards. And when you scroll down, you see a section about state offices, and of course we will be updating the accreditation and the reaccreditation information very soon. The state standards, if you clicked on that, that would take you directly to if you wanted to download those state standards, but today we're going to be focusing on the resources. So that we do have, I'm continually working on resources, so business standards and direct services standards are coming soon, but the network operations standards are all finished, and here they are. So just kind of going back to that, list of things that aren't technically due every November, but that you should be tracking on an annual basis. So again, we have these developing new communities tracker. We have 2.2 for the annual training plan template. Again, for 5.1 for the state network protocols guide, et cetera, state network convenings tracker, things like that. And then you would download them and use them if you so choose. So we do have a couple of things that I did want to show you. So again, for the annual monitoring report and then the annual monitoring tracker. So let's actually go to the tracker first. So here's what the tracker looks like. And what you could do when you get this tracker is if you go to affiliate B, and let's just say, because I dream big, that this is CIS of Honolulu. And they have met certain things and not. And so then the tracker will, the tracker is supposed to pull, the tracker will pull your documentation. So for example, this affiliate A, not met was the mission statement, not met was the bylaws, and then the tracker pulls it so you can see all of those things. So how does this help you? So this goes through the business standards and the student support standards. And how does this help you fill out the report? So this is the report. So you'd fill out your state office, CIS of Hawaii, for example. The review summary is going over all of your affiliates. So if you only had 2 affiliates, the review summary would encompass those 2 affiliates. If you had 30 affiliates, et cetera. So are there certain standards that are not being met? you would look kind of across the tracker to see, and are there standard, there's basically just certain questions that that kind of summarize across the affiliates, and are there serious concerns or red flags? I think that this one's an interesting thing, and again, this is just really helpful for us at National to know. Are there things that we, within the standards, that we're not making clear that we can make clearer, or something that's misunderstood within a standard? So that's really important for us to know. So you would fill out this review summary, which would encompass all of them, but then down here you would do the specifics. So we do request that you do a specific check of at least of these things. This is in particular surrounding the risk associated, so financial management policies, personnel policies, and volunteer policies, screening procedures, background checks, and then the audit. So this is a risk factor, and you would note if they've did not meet the standard and any areas of concern. And then, of course, because we also want to incorporate the student supports, you would do a data review and answer these questions. So if you went through the abridged check-in for 2016, you'll notice that this is somewhat similar. So it's a little bit, it's not quite as in depth as obviously what we do for reaccreditation, but this is also because you're doing this on an annual basis. So again, you would fill out the first page as a summary of all of your affiliates, and then each additional page, well, like a page and a quarter, would be specific to the individual affiliate. So CS of Honolulu, CS of Pearl City, et cetera, et cetera.
And just to emphasize, this is the only document that we need to see on an annual basis. So for each of your affiliates, filling out sort of this cursory or more, abridged type of review of their documentation. The tracker is more of a tool that you can use to support your annual check-ins with affiliates.
And so then the other thing that is due every year, regardless of whether you're going through reaccreditation or not, is this, the annual review, basically verification procedures. And so on this first sheet, actually the only thing that you need to fill in is the number of affiliates. So for CS of Hawaii, for example, let's just say they had 4. And then with each thing here, so again, I used the example CS of Pearl City. Did they complete their background check within 3 years? Yes. Data verification? No. And parent guardian consent? Yes. And so then the tracker pulled all that information, marked the no, and then also translated over to this affiliate summary. So I did check this one before. So let's just say that CIS of Honolulu did everything correctly. So yes, yes, yes. And then it will pull to the tracker over here. It will also pull to the affiliate summary, and you can see that now the percent with complete or accurate data, because we have 4 affiliates, is 50% for the background check and consent and parent guardian consent, and then 25% for the verification. So this one's a little bit, it has a lot of tabs. So obviously you'll only fill out, the number of tabs for each independent affiliate. Additionally, for the direct services, if you're a state office serving direct services, you'd fill this portion out. Oh, it's going good. And then you would fill this out, and we would at National would basically check your verifications. Are there any questions with these 2 reports that are due every year? Or any questions about anything I presented earlier? Okay, you can see here, again, all of the trackers and things. Well, if there aren't any more questions, we can end the webinar a little early.
Jump in.
Yeah.
If those folks, and Kelly, can you unmute anybody who's listed as a call-in user?
Yep.
For those folks who are not on WebEx and didn't type in your name, I just want to make sure that we get a sense of who's on the line so that we know to reach out to those state offices who may not have had an opportunity to send somebody to this. And I think one more go over. So if you signed in and did not enter your name when you logged on to WebEx, if you could just hop on, we've unmuted you. If you could just announce yourself real quick so we can get an accurate attendance for the webinar.
Doug Martin, State Director in Florida.
Great, thank you, Doug. And some of those users might be, call-in users might be those that sign on to both the phone and WebEx. But if you are only on the phone, please announce yourself. All right, well, thank you. That's all I had.
Yeah, great. If you have any questions about anything, of course, certainly feel free to reach out to me. You hopefully all have my contact information. And of course, if you have any questions about the resources, I'm happy to answer those as well. Thank you so much for being a part of this webinar on this wonderful Wednesday afternoon, and have a great rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you.